Hi, Vinny. Why don't you come into this room with me? We're going to take some time and it'll just be the two of us. We can sit in a private, quiet area to talk. I really appreciate you taking the time to come into the funeral home to talk to me. If you'd like some water or coffee, I'd be happy to get that for you, and then we can sit and talk a little bit further. I want to tell you again how sorry I am for the loss of your brother, Rocky. He meant a lot to your family and the band, and I'm hoping that I can answer any questions you may have. When a family member calls or meets with us to express how upset they are because they could not see their loved one, we do take that personally. It is our responsibility to examine each case thoroughly before making the determination if the individual can be viewed. When we receive a person into the funeral home who has suffered trauma, our goal is to restore that person to his or her natural form, or as you would know him. The restoration is classified into two groups, which are minor and major repairs. The extent of damage due to the shotgun wound to Rocco is considered major, as the repair would involve facial and cranial reconstruction. Rocco's mouth and his nose and eyes and parietal bones, which are they make up the top portion of the skull, were missing. Starting with his skull, there are bands of tissues called cranial sutures. So if you think about putting it together, those sutures actually look like you're putting a piece of a puzzle together. And there are several sutures that join the parietal bones together, including the lambdoidal in back, the squamosal on the side, which is actually where the bullet exited Rocco's head by his ear, the coronal, which is horizontal on top, and the sagittal, which is a vertical suture on top of the head. And since these sutures were destroyed, we were unable to line up the parietal bones, which make up the top portion of his head. And for this reason, the shape of Rocco's skull would look abnormal to you or someone else viewing him when they would come into the funeral home. In a case where we were able to repair the cranial sutures, his head would have been stable and we could have produced a better form for viewing. I would like to mention another area of his face. Both the maxilla, which forms the roof of our mouths, and the mandible or lower jaw were not fully present. As I understand, Rocco was a drummer in the band, but he also played trumpet. And the orbicularis oris, which is the muscle that surrounded his mouth, was not also present. From what your mother had told me, he had a signature way of playing the trumpet, and she asked if his lips could be slightly puckered for when we were able to, if we could have been able to show him for the viewing. And my staff and I tried to restore the orbicularis oris, but his teeth were shattered. So therefore, it didn't leave a lot of support for his mouth muscles, and that's why we were unable to do that. When Rocco did arrive at our funeral home, I personally evaluated his injuries. I want you to know that. And as much as I want you and your family to be able to see him, there was such extensive damage to his mouth and head, as I was explaining before, that he would not look like the person shown in the picture that you provided to us. I also understand that this should be your decision and your family's decision whether or not to see your brother, and I want you to know that I highly respect that. I respect you and your mother and the rest of your family, which is why I'm trying to provide you with as many details as possible of Rocco's current state. I'm very sorry to have to share this type of news with you and wish that we could have had a better outcome for you and your family.